friends, my name is Meredith, and today we are going to read about two characters that you might already know, Frog and Toad. And we are going to read one of the stories from this book. This book is called Adventures of Frog and Toad. And all of the Frog and Toad stories in this book are written and illustrated by Arnold Lobel. So that means he made up all the stories and wrote them down, and he did all of the drawings. Now this book, as you can see, it's a pretty thick book. There are a lot of stories in here, and we're not going to read all of them today. We're just going to read one. And the one we are going to read is called, not that one. Let's try again. The one we are going to read is called A Lost Button. So let's see if we can help find the lost button in this story. Toad and Frog went for a long walk. They walked across a large meadow. They walked in the woods. They walked along the river. At last they went back home to Toad's house. "Oh, drat," said Toad. "Not only do my feet hurt, but I have lost one of the buttons on my jacket." Okay, so there we are. Now we know where the lost button is coming from, Toad's jacket. "Don't worry," said Frog. "We'll go back to all the places where we walked. We will soon find your button." They walked back to the large meadow. They began to look for the button in the tall grass. "Here is your button," cried Frog. "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button is black. My button was white." Toad put the black button in his pocket. Okay, so now we know our first fact about the missing button. It is white. A sparrow flew down. "Excuse me," said the sparrow. "Did you lose a button? I found one." "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button has 2 holes. My button had 4 holes." Toad put the button with the 2 holes in his pocket. Okay, now we know another fact about Toad's button. It has 4 holes. They went back to the woods and looked on the dark paths. "Here is your button," said Frog. "That is not my button," cried Toad. "That button is small. My button was big." Toad put the small button in his pocket. Okay, now that's our third fact. Toad's button was big. Okay, let's see. A raccoon came out from behind a tree. "I heard that you were looking for a button," he said. "Here is one that I just found." "That is not my button," wailed Toad. "That button is square. My button was round." Toad put the square button in his pocket. Frog and Toad went back to the river. They looked for the button in the mud. "Here is your button," said Frog. "That is not my button," shouted Toad. That button is thin. My button is thick." Okay, so we have 2 more facts. His button is round, so it's a circle, and it is thick, not thin. Let's see if they ever find it. Toad put the thin button in his pocket. He was very angry. He jumped up and down and screamed, "The whole world is covered with buttons, and not one of them is mine." Toad ran home and slammed the door. There on the floor, he saw his white, 4-holed, big, round, thick button. "Oh," said Toad, "it was here all the time. What a lot of trouble I have made for Frog." Toad took all of the buttons out of his pocket. He took his sewing box down from the shelf. Toad sewed the buttons all over his jacket. The next day, Toad gave his jacket to Frog. Frog thought that it was beautiful. He put it on and jumped for joy. None of the buttons fell off. Toad had sewed them on very well. So that is the story of A Lost Button, all about Toad's lost button. Now, after reading that story, I wonder if we can remember all of the facts about Toad's button. Let's see if we can do it together.
What do you remember about Toad's button?
Let's see if we can remember some of the facts that we learned about Toad's button in the story. I happen to have some buttons here with me from my button collection. Maybe they can help us. Let's see. So I have two buttons here, a black button and a white button. What color was Toad's button? That's right, it was white. He had a white button on his jacket. And did Toad's button have 2 holes or 4 holes? 4 holes, that's right. Was Toad's button a big button or a tiny button like this one? It was a big button. All right, now let's see. Was Toad's button square or round? It was round. You're remembering all these facts. Now here's our last one. And I'm going to show you these buttons sideways. You can see, was it a thick button or a thin button? And here's what they look like this way. And here's what they look like sideways. Was it thick or thin? It was thick. So we're going to go over to the meeting board and I'm going to show you a chart that I made last time I read this story with some friends. And it has all the facts on it. And we can double check them from all the things we just remembered while looking at those buttons. All right, I'll see you at the meeting board. All right, let's see the chart about Toad's button. So this says Toad, and over here it says not Toad. So we know these are all the buttons that they found on their walk that were not Toad's button. And this is all about Toad's button. So white, 4 holes, big, round, thick. And the other buttons were, they found a black button, a button with 2 holes, a small button, a square button, and a thin button. So those are all the button facts. Now let's see if we can figure out one more fact. How many buttons did they find? So we have Toad's button. These facts are all about one button. Then we have these other buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus Toad's button is 6. They found 6 buttons altogether. And that is all about the story of Toad's lost button. It's called A Lost Button by Arnold Lobel. And it's in the book Frog and Toad Are Friends and Adventures of Frog and Toad. So you can find it in both of those places. And thank you so much for reading with me today. And I can't wait to read with you again next time. Bye for now.
Join the circle at sharingcircleeducation.com. Hope to see you there.